All right, so really pleased to welcome back Holly Niles today, who meant to look up which number podcast I had you on before, Holly, but anyway, I'll put that in the notes for everybody. But Holly is a clinical nutritionist and also a yoga instructor, which I love that combination. And I wanted to have Holly on again today to talk to us specifically about one of the 7 essential energies that I work with, which we call love energy. So this is the 4th one that we work with, and is a lovely bridge between the bottom 3 that are more about our physical bodies and the top 3 that are more about our mental, emotional bodies and selves. But this energy is all about, obviously, love. The name does give it away a bit, but very much about our ability to love ourselves, to feel compassion for ourselves and then be able to extend that to other people. Also having passion, like loving other things, not just loving other people, but what do you feel passionate about in your life? And how are you able to express and feel gratitude, and also how expansive you are in terms of your approach to life. Are you open to new experiences? Are you open to new people? Do you like to bring those things into you and into your life? So it is an energy that I find, and I do work mainly with women, but that is not to say this doesn't apply to men at all. But this is very commonly an energy that women have a balance issue with, mainly because a lot of the time, especially in Western society, we are giving our love away. As women, as mothers especially, but not even mothers. I just find all the women that I work with will have, or not all, but it's very common to have an issue with giving your love away, not spending time and emotion and passion and compassion on yourself. So really important energy. And I wanted to have Holly to join us again so that we can talk specifically about the nutritional aspects of the love energy. So welcome, Holly, and lovely to have you here again. I wanted to, I guess, just get from you your ideas about love energy to start with. What are you... is there anything that I haven't mentioned that you like to cover? And also specifically about the nutritional aspects of it. How do you like to help people through it to activate and balance that energy?
Yes, well, thank you for having me back. It's a pleasure to be here today. I think you did a beautiful job of summing up the love aspect, particularly the highlighting, I think, of that challenge often with the self-love piece. It's certainly, it's often seen as selfish to take care of ourselves. I'm not altogether clear how that message got spread, but it's worldwide. The same message. It's like if I'm taking time for myself, somehow I'm selfish. I need to always be giving. And so I think within that, I think there's a lot of learning that comes, and sometimes it comes from being out of balance in some way, right? We find sometimes in Food and Spirit, we talk about an overactive aspect or an underactive aspect. And sometimes we find a real deficiency, which then can lead to challenges in other aspects, like talking about your truth, right? If your heart's not on board. And one of the images that I have around the love aspect comes from a favorite teacher of mine, Carolyn Mace, who's written several books, Anatomy of the Spirit and such. And she always talked about this idea, you were talking about how it's sort of this bridge between the lower energies coming up into the more spiritual energies. And she gave this beautiful analogy that said, if your heart's not on board, it doesn't matter. So you can have this incredibly brilliant spiritual inspiration that you're trying to bring down into your life. If your heart's not on board, it will go off track. If you're very focused on lower energies, it becomes very sort of ritual and survival energies until you start to bring that up into the heart. So I think a bridge is a beautiful image for that. You know, when we think about how do we stoke the love, right? If we're thinking nutritionally, we're going to be thinking about green, right? Green vegetables. And I think, no pun intended, most nutritionists love the green vegetables, right? We're always doing our best to get clients to eat more of them because they represent so many different aspects. And as is true many times with foods, when we bring a food in with a single focus, in fact, it will have many benefits. So if we think of a green vegetable as really opening up that green love energy, we know with those green vegetables becomes, for example, fiber. And fiber is so helpful for our gut and to help, you know, make good bacteria and things like that. If we branch over into some specifics within vegetables, thinking about just green foods in general, we're going to be thinking chlorophyll, right? High pigments, these deep chlorophyll pigments that we find in green vegetables, which if we think about the love, and as I think about it, even anatomically, we think about our heart, our emotional heart, but even our physical heart, our blood, our circulation. The analogy is often made that chlorophyll is to a plant as blood is to a human body. And so there's a lot of crossover there. So when we eat these rich chlorophyll foods, we find we actually improve our cardiac health, our circulatory health. So, I mean, probably I could talk about this for the entire podcast, the benefits of these veggies, but those are just a couple that I would think right out of, you know, the gate, I think are really significant for both our emotional heart, but our physical heart as well.
So are there other foods that are in particular healthy foods give our heart or even our respiratory or circulatory systems in particular the nutritional requirements that they have? And then also on the other side, what are the problematic foods that interfere with the physical actions of this energy system?
Yeah, so one of the benefits when we are thinking about some of these leafy greens, things that are high in fiber, these natural plant fibers, in a way, fiber is like a little bit of a scrubber within our cardiovascular system. So that to me is another benefit of focusing on these higher fiber foods. Even if we branch over into some of the cruciferous vegetables, so those we know as sort of the broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, things like that, they're very high in sulfur compounds. And sulfur is a big part of liver detoxification. So often in cardiac events, we're having oxidative stress. So, you know, there are differing perspectives. Functional medicine looks at a response like cholesterol. We see that as a response from the body of being presented with a lot of inflammatory foods and lifestyle choices that the body brings the cholesterol in a way, it's like a patch to say, listen, you know, in that cardiovascular system, we don't want any breaches. It's very important. So the cholesterol comes in almost like you're patching a leaky tire in a way. And so when we eat these clean foods, it keeps that cardiovascular system running well, and it reduces that oxidative process, which is, we might be able to say, it's a little bit like rusting, like the body rusts from these more, you know, inflammatory foods. Like poor fats, I think, are probably one of the worst offenders for cardiac health, if we're thinking just creating inflammation in the body. So, you know, things like canola oil, safflower oil, soybean oil, quote unquote vegetable oil, which I'm going to imagine lives everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
They're often in plastic bottles, which is really volatile. They're really hard on the body. So that group of foods, I would say, would be ones you'd want to avoid. Anything processed or highly refined. You know, I often give this analogy. If I took some, let's say some fresh spinach or maybe some Swiss chard or something, and I sauteed it in a pan with olive oil and garlic, when you look at it, you see like this vitality. There's texture, there's color. It's like kind of alive. If I take something on the other end of the spectrum, like white pasta, and cook it and put it on the plate, it's sort of beige, flat, sticky. There's no dynamic in it. And I think that for me, that's really how I think about how we eat for our overall body, but specifically if we're thinking heart health, cardiac, even our lungs, our respiratory system, the same thing. We don't want to oxidize. We don't want to bring in lots of things that create this damage within those systems.
Mm. And so for people who who kind of aren't familiar with that term of oxidative stress, can you just give us a 101 on what's occurring in the body?
Sure. So if any of you ever remember when you were young, if you had a swing set in your yard that was made from pipe, over time, when you first got it, it looked really nice and was probably red or a color. And then over time, and you see it starts to rust, it actually oxidizes. That's what we call that. It's a form of rusting. It starts to break down from this exposure. And so in a way, that's what it's like in the body. So if we bring in something, let's say I've got something that's like a fried donut that was done in vegetable oil. We'll use an extreme example. When we take that in, it has all these like damaging free radicals because it's not really a whole food. That oil's been heated, so it's now damaged oil. And so when I eat that, it kind of leaves a trail in a way through the body of trauma, mini trauma, because it's in fact a broken down food that is going to cause challenges as the body tries to utilize it. So if we take that example of the Swiss chard, when you take that in, the body has a programming that says, I know what this is. I know how to use this. This is all beautiful. When we take in, let's say that donut, it's not really a food, it's a calorie. And so then the body goes like, I'm going to have to run this through because you ate it, but it's going to leave a little bit of trail afterwards of what we'll call damage or rusting in a way. So.
Yeah. And so when you said that the fiber is a scrubber, do you mean that that's really effectively scrubbing that kind of rust or, damage out of our system?
Yes, in a sense it cleans. So there's lots of ways we can get fiber. We're talking plant fiber here, but there's, other soluble fibers. And so it actually does, in a sense, create almost like a little scrub brush of just keeping things flowing in the body.
Yeah. Okay, great. And then, so you mentioned cooking your Swiss chard with olive oil and garlic, something I do very regularly. But so obviously olive oil is not a problematic oil. So I'm just curious to get for people, because you mentioned a whole lot of oils which aren't great for cooking with. Other than olive oil, are there other oils that you like to recommend for people to cook with?
Well, avocado oil is a good choice. In general, what's most ideal is that your oil comes in a dark glass bottle. That's really the perfection. If you say, hey, olive oil is the easiest for me to get, just choose that. You don't want your oil to come, first of all, any oil that's clear as the bottle has been modified in some way. So you want something that's dark, the bottle to be dark, and it to be more closely associated with the food it came from. So olives are pressed to make olive oil. Avocados are pressed to make avocado oil. There is no vegetable oil when was the last time you pressed a vegetable and got oil from it?
Yeah.
So it's like, that's a little bit of something that's been cooked and modified to create a foreign fat. So coconut oil can be good as well. You can use ghee, which is clarified butter.
Mm-hmm.
Those are probably the high points, I would say. For me, I think that gives you a pretty nice selection by using those. They're simple. They come from plants. You can make an immediate connection when you see them to the plant that they came from.
Yeah. Okay, great. And then the dark glass bottles. So this is something that I'm always on about as well in regards to plastics and microplastics getting into whatever we're storing in them. And so you're saying that the problem with oils in clear plastic bottles is that what you're indicating the problem is?
Yes, it starts to absorb some of that plastic. The oil itself has been modified to start with, and then just sitting clear plastic on a shelf with the sun radiating on it or the lights, it basically is creating a little mini chemical reaction in there where you're getting those plastics in the oil itself is already bad. And then when you combine it with the plastic, it's just not a goodness for your body at all.
Yeah. And if people are wanting to occasionally do like a deep frying of something, what oil would you recommend they use for that?
It's a good question.
Or do you just say, don't do it?
I'm probably not a big fan of the deep frying because it kind of takes us down another pathway for, advanced glycation end products, right? What we call sort of AGE. So when you raise oil to really high temperatures, it's not as optimal. So coconut oil does take heat pretty well. It has a higher smoke point. So I guess if maybe you have your local specialty place that you go to that something is deep fried and that's your treat, once a year, a couple times a year, maybe you just go for how they do it. But I don't think there's probably a healthful way to do that.
Fair enough. Okay, cool. So you talked about fats as definitely the bad fats definitely being problematic. Anything else that's particularly problematic for this system of energy?
Well, I think processed foods, processed carbohydrates, sugar, we could really, any aspect you interview me for, I would say the sugar is a bad choice, right? Yeah. It's very oxidizing. It's hard on the body. It definitely creates, it can create even blood sugar issues. There's a lot of downsides to doing that. So anything processed, from an oil to a grain, to white foods with lots of extra ingredients, all of those would be hard for this aspect.
Yeah. Okay. And for us in general. So cool. All right. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about the thymus gland. So each of these 7 essential systems of energy have a gland associated with them. And for the love energy, it is the thymus gland. And I always remember when I did my kinesiology course, we would always talk about the thymus gland, and there would be various maneuvers that we'd do using the thymus gland as the life energy of somebody. I just wanted to, I guess, get the scientific reasons why we're associating this with the love energy, and again, and the thymus gland is part of our lymphatic system. So I'd love to have you talk a bit about that in general and how to support that gland and the lymphatic system with nutrition as best we can.
Yeah, so the thymus gland is part of the immune system. What's interesting about the thymus gland, when you're little, it's big, and when you grow up, it's little. It actually shrinks over time, right? So it's a producer of a kind of a white blood cell, a T cell, which is, you know, kind of a surveyor that's going to be looking for foreign invaders and wanting to, you know, go after them. So it's small but mighty, right? And it works in collaboration with some of our other immune responses. What's interesting about it is it's, you know, when we're in a hyperimmune, you know, reactivity, let's say autoimmunity or allergies or things, of course, the body's it's working harder, right? Because when we're in the landscape of autoimmunity, the body is thinking in the most simplistic way. We could say it's really kind of thinking that it's being attacked, but internally. It's like as if you're attacking yourself in a sense, and it's a cycle. So that puts more pressure on the thymus to work a little harder. Then if we think of hypoimmune situations, let's say something very serious like HIV, that's where it doesn't seem to have the oomph to take care of infections like that. It's like that's a really big infection. So what I think is curious about the thymus, one of the things that we know about it, it has a very close relationship to cortisol, which cortisol comes from that sympathetic nervous system. That's that chemical that makes us be able to run from the tiger when it's chasing us. And so there's a direct correlation. When stress is high, cortisol is high, the thymus goes low. It can't compete with that. And so what's kind of interesting, if we think about, if we kind of go back and tie our pieces together from how we started. So if we think about this giving, right? I'm giving all the time. I'm loving my family. I'm loving my friends. I'm not taking care of myself. I'm very stressed. I'm not doing self-care in any way. Now I'm driving my cortisol really high because everything's an emergency all day. Now I've got an effect on my thymus. So now I'm really affecting my immune system by not loving myself. We can make that leap, right? If we go back and tie those pieces together. Yeah. So that's kind of how I like to think about it. It resides here. One of the exercises that is done for the thymus is tapping, right? Just tapping on the chest. There's some practitioners actually do it almost like the Tarzan tap, you know, like you see in the movies, right? But that idea of kind of thumping, now if we think about symbolically, even in movies, this thumping the chest is almost a passionate statement, right? It's like you're really coming from this place of like really stating your whatever your case, your demand. So there are some folks who think it's a really nice practice for self-love to just do some gentle tapping there, maybe every day, just, say, hello, thymus, join me today. And as we go through the day and maybe now in the landscape of COVID, we might think like, let's be very proactive with enhancing our immune system. So it's always so interesting how beautifully complex the body is. And we see how we can make these connections between something like love and our thymus gland, which is part of our immune system.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for that. And so other than the, eating lots of veggies, avoiding sugar, avoiding the bad fats, any particular nutritional recommendations for the thymus gland?
I think what's beautiful is when you do those positive changes, which, as we said, we could speak of really relative to all the aspects, you get a good return on your investment, right? When you're eating well, it's not like we have to go, oh gosh, what is the diet for the root? Oh, what's my diet for the truth? It's like when we start moving through that rainbow of foods, we start to see how it reaches across, and we see beautiful crossovers. So I think those greens, I've never in my whole career had a patient eat too many greens. It's never happened. So I think just finding creative ways. I'm also a fan. of these little microgreens. I don't know if they're trending everywhere, but I'm starting to see these little microgreens. Beautiful, right? You've got the potential of the whole plant in this little wee package, and they're delicious, and you can put them on top of, you know, salads or other things. So that's kind of a new favorite of mine, but I think just running that gamut of green. Do I have green in my meal? How many green things have I had today? I think is probably, you know, going to nourish the immune system, and then thymus will benefit as a result.
Yeah. It always feels wrong to me if there's a meal that doesn't have green in it. And I think, you know, I think that probably was with me from childhood, because my mum was always very, you know, very great with vegetables. So, yeah, I totally agree with that. And I love also the idea of thinking about the vegetables with their beautiful, you know, you can see the veins running through, especially the leafy vegetables, and then thinking about our own respiratory system and all the networks of blood cells, which I think Deanna had, I'm sure I learned that concept from her, about thinking about the leaf of the plant and then the leaf of your own cardiovascular system. Yeah. Okay. And then the breasts and breast tissue are also very much associated with the love energy, which makes sense. They're in that physical area of the body. And so I was just curious to know if you had any experience in helping cancer patients who have breast cancer in particular in your practice.
Yeah, it's not a primary focus of my practice, but I've definitely worked with patients who are in recovery or in that process. I think it beautifully connects to that whole idea of nurturance, though. What a powerful symbol. I mean, if we think about how we how we create life, and then how we nurture these lives, our little babies, right, who nurse, you know, this idea of nurturance, and then there seems to be a disconnect with self-nurturance, right? So, and I say that with all due respect, no blame, no guilt for somebody who's gone through that, but I think it's an opportunity to look at, like, do I nurture myself? Do I bring comfort to myself? Is there anything I do that really feeds me in a healthy, positive way? So, I think I've seen with the patients I've had, many of them will have a moment or a reflection to say, like, yeah, I was like full-time mom, working full-time, you know, I just was really burning the candle at both ends, and I think my body just broke down, you know. So that's a piece of that for sure.
Absolutely, totally agree. Their love totally burns out effectively, and then that, you know, something has to happen when we have these energetic imbalances, and something is going to happen in the physical body or with your mental health if you don't bring that balance in by doing something for yourself. So a bit of a lighter question, I guess. Now, I just you've mentioned a few green foods. Just wondered what your personal favorites are, Holly.
Well, I love broccoli rabe, or baby broccoli. And I think that's something that's pretty universal. I'm unusual in that I actually like the stalks of broccoli. I know most people like the trees, you know, the crown, but I like the stalks. And so I love baby broccoli because it has a lot of stalk to it. It's very flavorful. I'm a big fan of those. I also love those microgreens that we just talked about. I'm so curious. I've had little baby beet greens, which actually are also a very good food for the lungs. Beet greens and beets are a good food for the lungs, to nourish the lungs.
Why is that, Holly?
Because of their nitric oxide, they're high in nitrates. And so they're kind of a bonus. So again, you're getting the greens, but then you're getting that beet. There's also, if you eat the whole thing, now you've got the root there too. So you're getting a lot of good benefits. I also just love salads. I think I'm with my clients, I'm often creating these easy ways for people to get more vegetables. I respect not everybody is going to stand at their, stove for a half hour and cut and chop and prep. So I think these pre-washed greens are like so brilliant, because if you just take a bunch of greens and put some lemon juice and olive oil on them, you have like kind of a quick, easy salad.
Yep.
And so I'm a big fan of just the variety of greens that you can combine that way, the different tastes and flavors.
Yep, that's right. And we do have, so much variety available to us now. And I assume you're a fan as well of trying to eat fairly seasonally. Yep.
Yes, I think that's a great strategy. Depending on where people live, sometimes it's a little harder to do that. But probably if you live in, let's say, the northeastern United States or Northern Europe, and probably a strawberry in January doesn't make sense. Because that's probably traveled a really long ways to get to you. So I think it's nice when you can eat with your seasons.
Yep. And yes, we call baby broccoli, it's called broccolini here. But same thing. So when you buy big broccoli, do you still eat the stalks of like even the really thick parts? Or do you just cut them up?
I peel them. I kind of square them off. So I'll peel them down so I get to the heart of the stalk, and then I cut it up. And then cut it up with the crowns as well.
Ah, right. Nice. Yeah. I do try and incorporate a bit of the stalk when I'm using broccoli, but I don't. It's always a bit of a chunk that I don't use. So that's a really good tip. And also for our the planet people, we want to just try and reduce our food waste as much as possible. So there are certainly plenty of practices out there of eating absolutely every part of everything. And it's something that we can all do a bit more of, I think. All right, so you've probably covered them all, but I'd love to to finish off to get you to just give us your top I can't talk this morning, top 3 tips for how to nourish and sustain and balance that love energy. What would you say to people?
Well, I always like to think practically the green vegetables. That's and there's so many different green vegetables that, kale has had quite a run. I don't know. I think that's sort of everywhere. I always joke, I don't know who Kale hired as his PR firm, but boy, did he get his money's worth. Like, I have had clients actually apologize to me, like, I don't really like kale. It's just one player in the green family. So, get adventuresome, see what's out there maybe you've never had. So I think that's the practical piece. I think the idea of love, it's a word we use, maybe we overuse it, because you can love your husband and you can also love broccoli. So I think really kind of getting in touch with, what does it really mean to love myself? I had a patient this week who's made a really big transition. She was eating a lot of fast food and just really kind of eating very reactively. And she said to me, and I wrote it down because I thought it was so beautifully, she said, and I just looked in the mirror and I said, I love myself. Why wouldn't I be taking care of myself? And once I realized I love myself, this isn't hard work. This is just like, of course I'll do this for myself. So I think taking some honest inventory, I think, is a great idea. Like, what do you actually do that you can say you love, that makes you feel, good, that makes you feel nurtured? I think that's so important, whether you're a single person, a mom, a teacher, wherever you are in life. I think that's important. And then I think, this idea of reaching out. So, sharing food, donating, kind of opening your heart in a way. Sometimes we can combine those two things, maybe sharing a meal with others, I think, is a really beautiful way to really kind of bridge the practical and sort of that more emotional or kind of spiritual part of the love.
Mm. And that's probably one actually, well, not necessarily donating, but probably even donating food, but certainly sharing food with the whole COVID situation this year. You know, people just haven't been able to do that nearly as much. And
Yes.
I'm sure, you know, that has an impact. I mean, the whole, you know, social fabric of how we exist has been so affected, but that's a really good point. And it's, you know, you really notice, like where I am now in Melbourne, we're just slowly coming out of our second really big, long and serious lockdown. And you know, and the weather's getting better as well because it's spring here. And the other day on the weekend there were so many people out, you know, in the parklands. You know, we're allowed to actually sit down now. We can go out and sit down. We don't have to just go out and exercise. And people just, you know, obviously grabbing something takeaway or even just a takeaway coffee and being together and
Sure.
sharing that.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I think you can be very creative, whether you say to your friend, hey, I put some food together, you put some food together, we'll
Yep.
meet outside, we'll do our distance. But I think just kind of sharing that connection with others, I think is really maybe needed more than ever right now. So
Yeah, I think picnics are going to have a massive boom in Melbourne this summer, so that's not a bad thing. Okay, so that's fabulous. Thank you so much, Holly. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention about the love system today?
the other thing that really comes to mind is a bit of a spiritual practice around gratitude, because gratitude is a big part of the love. And, you know, I think now there's a lot of challenges, and I'm respectful of various people with various types of challenges. But if we think back to this idea of like being stressed and how, you know, our immune system gets so depleted by stress, I think that's one beautiful practice that you can do on your own is, you know, create a gratitude journal, or, you know, that's been done quite a bit, but chooses 3 things she's grateful for. She does it at the end of the day, and she makes herself choose 3 new things every day. And that can be, I had 3 green lights, traffic lights on the way home. My car started up. I saw 3 birds. Like really, she starts to really look through her day, because she knows she can't just say the food in my refrigerator, or, you know, the fact I have a bed. She actually will choose 3 things. So I think that's a really beautiful way to calm your nervous system and also kind of activate your love.
Yep, totally agree. And that is something that I do personally. And it's also really good with gratitude to be thinking and not necessarily writing, because sometimes if you're like me, I do it last thing, but you know, before I'm going or when I'm going to bed. But to think through, I'm writing this down because, you know, what's the why of why you have that grateful feeling about this thing or this person or something that happened. That makes it even more powerful when we can identify why we're grateful. So yeah, thank you for mentioning that. And just curious as well, from your yoga practice and background, is there anything that you'd mentioned from that, or any, you know, maybe easy poses or anything that most people would probably have heard of that you'd recommend for the love system?
Well, the one that, depending on the tradition you come from, is the fish or the supported fish. And
Yep.
sometimes I give this to my clients who feel a little constricted. So you can lie on your back, and of course, you're going to know your own parameters around your back or your neck, but you want to elevate your chest. So maybe it might be a folded blanket or a pillow, so that when you lie down, your head is above your heart.
Yep.
And in yoga, that's almost as if the brain is bowing to the heart and saying, okay, you take center stage for a moment. So I think that one is a great, you know, posture to do some breathing. Maybe you're listening to relaxing music that I think does help physically and also emotionally.
Yeah.
That's a great one. there's yoga mudra is another one where you interlace your hands behind your back and you're actually lifting through the heart, and then you're bending over, the same idea. So the head bows to the heart. So there's a few like that are very heart focused.
Yeah, anything, I guess, chest opening is good, isn't it? Great. Yes. Thank you so much.
And breathing.
Yes. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Yes. So, is there any particular breathing practice that you would like to mention as well for this energy?
I think the one that I do most commonly with patients is a breath called the 478 breath, and many people know it. You're inhaling to the count of 4, you hold your breath to the count of 7, and then you exhale to the count of 8. Mm-hmm. So just a little tidbit from that is that exhalation turns on your parasympathetic nervous system. Yeah. We were talking before about the sympathetic system being all about the stress and the tiger chasing you. So the parasympathetic is that opportunity for the body to be resting and digesting. So when you have that beautiful long exhalation, it helps the nervous system switch. And someone told me that there's actually an app now for the 478 breath. But it's a beautiful practice. It's so simple. You can do it in an elevator, while you're waiting in line, at a traffic light. It can be done anywhere. And I think it kind of calms that nervous system. We could say it really speaks to just getting that breath in and out of the lungs. I think it activates the love. I think there's many, many benefits. So that's one of my favorites that I give often.
Yeah, that's great. And I think you're absolutely right. We have the breath available to us anywhere, anytime, and it is such a powerful tool. And really, focusing on the exhale, because so many people don't exhale fully, or, even anywhere near fully. And that is where we're holding our breath, and we're holding stress, and we're holding tension, but you really want to let it all go.
Yes.
So perfect. Thank you for that. That's fabulous. All right. Well, really great to chat to you again, Holly. I'm so pleased to have been able to have you back again. And do you want to just quickly again just say where people are best to find you if they want to get in touch with you?
Sure. The easiest is my website. It's hollyniles.com. And on there's contact information, and there's a phone number. And if you prefer to use email, you can reach me at info@hollyniles.com.
Great. Thank you for that. So I'll put those links to that in the notes about the video and also the podcast. So this will appear on my YouTube channel and in my 5-Star Wellbeing podcast as well. So thanks so much, Holly. Really great.